Well, let's have the roll call. We'll go through. I'm Vice Chair Brian Westcott. We have Mary Morris. I'm sorry.
It's Mayorga.
Mayorga and
Yes.
Dave Witherton. Committee member Susanna Hill, Carol Wong, City Council member Jan Wilson, committee member Matt Normington, City Council member Cecilia Taylor. We have Marvin Davis, interim finance director, and Renee Singe, management analyst. And I think that's all in attendance.
Ronnie Singh, thank you.
Okay, next is review of the agenda. Has everyone received the email with the agenda and has it at their disposal? Any issues with that? Okay, thank you. Then tonight on the agenda, we'll start with regular business. The first order of business is to select the new Finance and Audit Committee Chair and Vice Chair. And just to be clear, I think that is serves for a period of 1 or 2 years. I believe 1.
1 is correct.
Okay. So first is we will take any nominations, and you can self-nominate for the chair. Any nominations? I'll self-nominate for the chair position.
Vice Chair Westcott, this is Councilmember Taylor. Just 2 things. One is, I believe we have a committee member that is still in the participant list.
Let me see. Okay. Which one would that be? Oh, yes, two participants raised hands, but I think you have control over that.
I just promoted one of our committee members, Michael DeMoss.
Oh, yes, and he's still muted. Michael, could you unmute? Michael, I'm not sure you can hear us. Can you? You're still muted. Okay, Michael.
Well, he's present.
He's present. Okay. No, he's unmuted now. All right. Let me repeat that. First order of business then is to select a new Finance and Audit Committee Chair and Vice Chair. And these people are responsible for running the meetings and any special scheduling. So the first nominations are for the chair, and we will take any nominations and you can self-nominate. And this is active for a year, 1 year. Okay, as I said, I will self-nominate Brian Westcott. Any others? Okay.
I believe there's a hand raised.
Okay, let's see. I don't see it myself.
Vice Chair Westcott, it's Councilmember Taylor. And I wanted to self-nominate myself for Vice Chair, even though we're not there yet on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Well, let's take care of one position at a time because we have to vote as a committee. So for the position of chair of the Finance and Audit Committee with a period of time of 1 year, we have Brian Westcott. Any opposed? No. Okay, so it's and all are in favor, I would hope. Okay. So first order of business, the chair has been elected, Brian Westcott. Now we'll move to the position of vice chairman, and we have a self-nomination, Cecilia Taylor, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any other nominations for the I'm sorry, the vice chairman. Chairperson, I should say, excuse me. Any others? Okay, so we'll vote on Cecilia Taylor for the vice chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, serving 1 year. Anyone opposed? No. Okay, all in favor? Okay, the motions or the election is passed and Cecilia Taylor will become vice chair.
Thank you.
All right. So the next order of business, and Marvin, you can help me on this, is to review and receive the March 31st investment reports. And is there any update or report you'd like to make to the committee on that?
Only thing is that I think there may have been some questions regarding the ESG rating of the city's corporate investments.
Okay.
And so this is probably where I'll have Dave kind of review it. Also too, if you notice, what my staff is going to do is that as we get the budget adopted, we are going to put together a cash model, and then we're going to allocate some of our liquid investments longer term because the rates have changed. We want to take advantage of the interest, but we just can't do it just yet until the budget is done, and then we get a thorough understanding of the city's cash flows, and then we will coordinate with Dave on that model to get those investments moved long term.
Okay. So you're saying, Dave, you would like to present, and of course, at some point, we'll open this up for public comment. So Dave, you have the floor.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chairman. For those that aren't familiar with Insight Investment, we're part of Bank of New York, Mellon, and we manage public sector portfolios all across the country. And we've been managing and working with the city for a number of years now. So, just to kind of give you an idea about the economic, I talked to Marvin and we thought we'd cover a couple of different topics. We thought we'd cover just a little bit of what's been happening in the economy. As Marvin said, interest rates have been going up, and we think they may, leveled off a little bit, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that, kind of what's been happening in the portfolio, and then talk about the ESG ratings, because I know that's a topic that people have some interest in. And it's certainly been all over the news. If you're looking at any of the business news lately, there's been a lot of discussion about it. So just to kind of give you a background on what's been happening in the economy, last year, the economy was absolutely roaring. I think we ended the year in the last quarter of last year with 6.9% growth in GDP, or gross domestic product, which is the largest, broadest measure of economic activity in the country. So that was great. However, the first quarter of this year, we actually had negative GDP, about 1.4% down. Now, so it seems pretty much at odds. You're growing at this very, very fast pace at the end of last year, and then all of a sudden, the first quarter of this year, you hit this sort of a stall area. And if you look behind the numbers, we still see that consumers, which make up about 2/3 of the economy, almost 75% of the economy, are still spending pretty robustly, right around about a 3%. And so, because that's such a large driver in the economy, some technical things happened in the first quarter that made it negative. But the economy is actually doing very well. We had some retail sales come out the other day. We're actually spending; those were up, and then so consumers continued to spend. So the economy is doing well, not as well as it was last year, and we needed it to moderate back down to a little bit slower pace, because if we looked at the economy before the pandemic, it was running just under 2%, about 1.9% sort of growth for about a 10-year period before the pandemic started. So that's kind of the baseline. That's kind of where we're headed back towards. That's the average or the mean of what we're kind of expecting. But we think we're going to be a little bit above that. We think we're probably going to run at around 2.5% GDP this year. So we're going to have another pretty good year this year. But there are some things weighing on the economy. I mean, you can't look at the news and not talk about inflation. I mean, inflation's at a 40-year high. We haven't seen this kind of inflation, which is running right around 8% right now.
I think they were saying, gas topped $8 in a gallon in LA the other day.
Yes.
Well, yeah, gas in California. I mean, you can't. You guys are absolutely the peak in the country. It's rough. I mean, and that has a drag on the economy. So we're saying, oh yeah, we're going to run at 2.5%, but you know, things are slowing it down, and inflation is certainly biting into consumers' pockets. And eventually, when you're spending that kind of money on gas and essentials, you might not be spending it on non-essentials. So you might start to cut back in other areas. So it's a drag. Inflation's kind of a drag on the economy. It didn't help that, you know, the war started in February, and because you know, Russia's such a big energy producer, and now Europe has decided not to buy Russian energy and that sort of thing, and gas prices in January when we started were about $75-80 a barrel. In the beginning of January it was 75, and it went up to about $80 a barrel towards the end. But now it's over almost $120 a barrel, just under that, maybe about 117 or 118. So that's a big jump. That's a 40% increase in oil prices, and that has a high correlation with going into a recession. So while we're predicting that we're going to have a relatively robust 2022, we're getting concerned about 2023. Our forecast is still that we will slow down to about a 2% growth rate in 2023 and avoid recession. But there are some factors that are weighing on it, and inflation certainly is one. The other thing that's happening, Marvin alluded to it earlier, is that the Federal Reserve, in order to try and control inflation, they do what they typically do, which is to try and raise interest rates, which is what they call causes demand destruction, which basically slows the economy. I mean, is what we're trying to say, is that, you know, it makes it more expensive for people to buy houses or get car loans and that sort of thing. And because it becomes more expensive, people want to buy less of it. And essentially it reduces demand as well. So that is designed to slow the economy. So you get these rising oil prices. You've got these supply chain problems also out there with COVID over in China still getting locked down and periodically causing supply chain issues. And so the economy is definitely slowing. It's slowing from the pace that we ended last year rather quickly. I mean, even our forecasts have changed. At one point we were predicting 3.5% GDP this year. We're down to 2.5%. Who knows? In another couple of months, we might be down to 2%. But we still think it's going to be positive. And if we have what we call mean reversion, when we go back towards the average and we kind of level off here, which is what the Federal Reserve is really hoping for. When they raise interest rates, they're trying to control that inflation and not let it get ingrained in the economy, and cool the economy off enough that we don't have some of the inflationary pressures, and even from employment's running at 3.6%. That's absolutely the low of where it was before the pandemic started. And so wages have been going up, and wages have been going up pretty dramatically. And I'm sure you see that when you're in your hiring process there. Sometimes it's hard to get good people. It's hard to find people. And in fact, there's more job openings in the country right now than there are people looking for work. And new claims for unemployment are at some all-time lows we haven't seen in about a decade. So the economy is robust. It's hard to see it going into a recession, because consumers are doing well, pardon me, with savings. Their savings rates are up. Savings versus their interest expenditures is at an all-time low. So their ability to meet debt and debt obligations is very high. A lot of people who saved the stimulus checks. So people are flush with money, and they didn't have, during the pandemic, they didn't have things to spend it on anyways. They couldn't go on vacation. So they ended up saving money. So the consumers look great. Corporations look good. Corporate balance sheets are at all-time high with cash. And like I said, employment is very high. Those are all things that say we're not going to go into recession, because those are all good things. No one's overextended, either corporates or corporations or individuals. And, employment's very, very high. But these energy prices and inflation are starting to slow the economy. We're already starting to see it. And the Federal Reserve has said they're going to raise interest rates. They've already started. They've raised about 75 basis points, or 0.75%. And they pledged to raise another 0.5% in July or June, and 0.5% in July. So those rates are coming up. So because of that, what we've done in the past, during the pandemic, rates were very low. So we shortened up the portfolio and made it shorter. So we weren't investing for a long time at the bottom of the interest rate cycle. But as we're coming up to the top of the interest rate cycle, and I think we're getting pretty close to it, we want to start extending out some of the duration within the portfolio. Because if we're at the top of the interest rate cycle, we want to lock in some of these rates for a longer period of time.
So what
Marvin was talking about.
So what I would say is that if you are able to see attachment A, can you see attachment A on your screen? Or should I be, if everyone can see attachment A?
You'll have to share it. I don't think we can see it.
So I'll share it.
Okay.
Okay, so you guys can see attachment A here now, right?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not now.
Oh, it's coming up. Okay, yeah.
Okay, a little bit later. So what Dave is referring to, and we'll be working together without a doubt on this. This attachment A kind of shows you what we are kind of preparing to do with the city's money. So you see the late balance here at about $56 million. In addition to that, we got about $30 million in Union Bank. This is just our normal checking account. Okay, and so you pretty much know how much that's earning. And so what we're getting ready to do is about $80 million. You see the weighted average maturity of our portfolio. It's like 1.76 years. That's about to turn to 5 years. And what this $80 million is going to do, rather than earning 38%, this $80 million is probably going to be earning about 1.5%. You guys can see what I'm talking about, right?
Right.
Okay, so now Dave and I are conservative. I could have estimated an extra $1 million in investments for the next year's budget. But as Dave pointed out, we probably don't want to go too strong, but we're going to move it. We're going to shift it. We're going to shift it. It is probably going to go, we're going to shift it long term, how Dave pointed out. And as we're shifting, you'll see big moves in this guy as we report on a quarterly basis. And so for this year's investment earnings, we pretty much just estimated last year's. But if we are looking at this thing right, and Dave thinks we are, you'll start seeing those additional returns coming in as we're shifting the money long term. Does that make sense?
Marvin, want to
just-
comment? Oh, there you go. Susanna, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
I was just going to call on you since you had raised your hand.
Oh, so that's a dramatic change, going from a 1-year average maturity in the portfolio up to 5 years. So I'm new on the committee, so I read all this stuff, and I saw that one of the things we're trying to do here while maximizing return is also to some degree matching the maturity of the investments to the timing of when we're going to need the cash, because this is all cash management that we're doing, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. And so I was just wondering how much of the portfolio is going to be in the 4 and 5 year length, and how much of it is going to stay in the 1 to 3, because the whole range goes from 1 to 5. So we're going from the bottom to the top. And so I just want to make sure I understand what the range is in those years in between, those maturities in between.
Well, I mean, and that's a good point. There's also a maturity distribution in the March report, and you can see it now. We don't really have much in the 3 to 4 year area or in the 4 to 5 year area, because as Marvin said, and we had talked about earlier, we've been keeping the portfolio relatively short, but we are going to start extending out more into that 3 and 4 year area and fill that area out, and have also in the 4 and 5 year area and buy some longer term securities in there. But we think the whole weighted average maturity will just be over about 2 years. So the average maturity will be out a couple more years, but we will have more of a normal distribution, and it's probably going to have the bulk of the assets centered in that 2 to 3 year area.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I had heard you say that the entire portfolio would be at the 5 year.
No.
And I said that I couldn't have heard that right. So
No,
I withdraw my question.
So what we
Well,
typically,
I think Marvin's saying he's anxious to try and lock in some of these higher rates. And, you know, when rates were at 25 basis points last year, we just really had to hold off until we got to the peak in this cycle. And I think we're pretty close to the peak right now. Bloomberg Intelligence was just saying that the rates are going to probably top out at 3% across the board. And we're almost there at the moment.
So how do you figure it's going to top out at 3%? Because in the 70s, when gasoline was at these, well, actually in the 70s, petroleum was a lot higher. But the last time we had a gasoline crunch and a little bit of inflation, we ended up with stagflation, and inflation was at like, you know, interest rates were 18%, 15%.
Yeah, we had double-digit inflation, right?
So how do we figure we're not going to hit that again? I'm not hoping we will. I just
well, we hope we're not too. But we really feel that inflation's really already reached the peak. In fact, we saw it moderate a little bit. During the month of March, it was at 8.5%. It's now dropped down in April to 8.3. We think when the numbers come out for May, it's going to drop down even lower. And we're also there's a technical term called a basis effect, which means that goods prices were already starting up last year at this time. So there's like a reset. So it doesn't grow when you measure it, you grow for year over year or month over month from year to year. And the rate prices had already started up in May and June of last year. So that sets the growth target. So it's not going to grow at nearly as fast a pace, and it's going to start to moderate. We think it's going to be down around 5% by the end of this year. And by the middle of next year, we think it's going to be starting to approach the 2% target range. Not quite at 2%, probably down more around 3% or just under. The Fed's target range is still to get it down to 2%. So,
we think that for 2022, inflation will be 2%, and our returns are going to be like 1.5%. So we're going to be, that's where we're going to be at.
Well, I think we're adding securities that are going back into the portfolio at right around 3%. Right now, if you buy 3-year treasuries, they're at 283 today. If you're buying 3-year corporates, they're up in the 330s. Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff's pretty nice compared to where we were at this time last year.
So the point, like we were saying to committee member Susanna, if you look at this last statement that I'm making, so like the cash model that we're going to put together It's going to look at everything. It's going to look at our adopted budgets. It's going to look at our maturities, our encumbrances. It's going to look at everything and determine the right balance for the city in terms of taking advantage of it. Because the way where investments work is this: we can even go out 5 years, and if they give you 3.5%, if rates begin to fall, all they're going to do is call it, because they're going to call it right. So it's not really like you're taking a risk. The only way you would be taking a risk if like you would just essentially kind of not look at the adopted budget and the encumbrances and kind of see how the projects are consuming cash. But essentially, we can be a little bit more aggressive than what we've been, because we got like $80 million just sitting in LAIF in the bank, and it's just kind of sitting there. And yeah, so we're going to try to be a little bit more prudent if we can, you know.
Through the chair, I
Thanks.
just wanted to recognize the vice mayor has had her hand up. And then Mr. Davis, can you put it in present mode?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
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 Let's see.
So you want me to share or stop sharing?
If you can put it in present mode, or either that, or, I mean, because I know that this is a part of our attachment.
Okay. Okay.
Wait, are we trying to share another document?
No. I just want to make sure you can see the staff report. Can everyone see the staff report?
Yes.
Okay, that's what we're referring to, just the staff report. And
Thank
so
you.
the staff report, as you can see, it kind of shows you that we have about $30 million just sitting in the bank. And so this is money that we probably want to take advantage of. And in addition to our late balance, and our late balance right now is also 56 million. So it's, as we pointed out, we kind of want to work together to get this invested, and we will. But before we do, obviously we're going to bring back the model to the committee, you know, before we start moving like really big amounts. But it's the right move to do.
Okay.
Marvin, I think we should let Vice Mayor Willison ask her question or make her comment.
Sure.
Oh,
Thank
maybe-
you. This is my first meeting of this committee, so I wasn't sure what the protocol is. So maybe if the chair or somebody wants to clarify, if we should raise their hand and then wait to be called on to speak. But I'm happy to, I'll default to wait to be called on, and then unless
Okay,
I'm
yes,
correct.
I'm sorry, because I didn't see the hand raised. I'll have to look for that, but we'll wait, we'll have hand raised because we have to, I'm not sure if there's any public people that they can also raise their hand. But you're, go ahead and you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Westcott. And actually, I think most, if not all of my questions were answered through the conversation with Committee Member Hill. One being about the term length that we're looking, the average term length. Another being, because you were mentioning we're at the top of the interest rate cycle, and like, how do we know that we're at the top? But I think is it Whithon?
Yes.
You did a good job kind of explaining the rationale behind looking to invest now, given where we're at with inflation and rising interest rates and whatnot. And then Mr. Davis, you had mentioned earlier that like an 80 million, and I think through this dialogue also that had to do with the 29 at Union Bank and the 56. Is it LAIF or LAIF?
LAIF.
LAIF. Okay, I don't know the terminology. Okay, the LAIF money. So yeah, I agree. I think well, I guess I can. So that answered my questions, and then I have a statement to say. But I don't know if you want to take public comment first, or if you want us to give our thoughts now.
Well, you can give your thoughts now.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I guess my only thing, and I think this is what you were getting at, Mr. Davis, is really kind of waiting to see the budget before we go fully aggressive. I think, in a vacuum, we should definitely, not hold quite so much in cash. But I think there's a few variables out there we're waiting to see with the budget, particularly. I know there's some legislative concerns about ERAF, and the UUT is a kind of a thing, and our COVID recovery and the rate of TOT hotel tax coming back. So while in theory, I think being more aggressive is a good thing, I think given the pandemic and some of these other specific unknowns, kind of having it, I'd rather go a little slower and make sure we're moving properly than lock all of our money away and find out that we need it. But I appreciate the thought that's gone into this. Thank you.
Right. And also along that line, for Marvin, are there any predictions this year on revenue increase or decrease from taxes, for the Menlo Park?
Yeah, the budget we have, we've estimated property tax increases at about $2.8 million. So that's property taxes for the general fund.
Right.
So there are some.
Okay. So, very good. Do we have any other comment? I don't see any hands. Okay. Well, so that is the agenda item on the
Now
go ahead, Marvin.
okay, I do believe that the ESG slide,
I think it's at the very bottom. There it is, right there.
there it is right there.
Okay.
This guy here, the ESG rating applied to our corporate bonds. I think City Council Member Jen Wilson kind of wanted a little definition of kind of how this rating is tabulated.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair.
Oh, yes, Jen, please.
Okay,
You have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd asked Marvin if we could take a moment to go through this. And I think this goes back to a city council discussion. It might have been mentioned in the staff report about fossil fuels and our climate action plan and aligning our investment strategies with our city goals. And I know that this analysis is a way to look at that, but I was curious, have any changes been made, or this is just where we were anyway? And then I have a hard time knowing the relativity of these scores. We can see them against each other, but I don't know, how good is good, how bad is bad,
Yeah.
that kind of.
If I can just take a minute and just kind of run you through the report, I think those are all great questions. And, I have to say, ESG reporting is, becoming relatively new. Let me tell you a little bit about it. Our firm, Insight Investment, was one of the original signers on the UN's what they call the PRI. And the PRI was the Principles of Responsible Investing. So we were one of the original signers on it. We do a lot of work here in the US. We also do a tremendous amount of work in Europe. And they've really adopted this approach. And one of the approaches of this principles of responsible investing that the UN came up with is to rate every company in 3 different areas. And it's called, the acronym is ESG: environmental score, a social responsibility score, and a governance score. And let me just tell you, environmental score, I think we all get. Are they harming the environment? Are they doing something that, from their business, it has some effect on the environment? Social responsibility is how do they interact with society and with the people, the constituent groups that they work with, either their suppliers or their employees. Do they treat their employees fairly? Do they treat their suppliers fairly? Do they, or do they exploit their employees or suppliers or somewhere down the supply chain? And do they have a bad reputation? I mean, you think of corporations that were using, child labor overseas. So, that gets you a bad social score. Governance score is companies, somewhat like the one that comes to mind is Enron, which is, are their audits true? Do they have independent audit committees? Do they have an independent board? Do they have a lot of diversity on their board? Or is it a closed? Do they have a lot of insider people on the board? So is the board doing a responsible job in controlling the overall operation of the company so that it benefits both the constituents internally and the employees and the shareholders and such and such? So those are the three areas of the scores. And I can provide you with more detail later on. I shot a slide over on some of the details over to Marvin on it, and the number of things we look at.
It confused me, so I didn't show it.
Marvin, I tell you what, it's a complicated slide, man. So without an explanation, it becomes, it's like, man, I don't know what they're looking at here.
Yeah.
But we're looking at, I think we look at 29 different categories within these three general headers. And we rate firms on each one of those categories. We actually use external services. We have a whole team of people on our ESG team to do this internally. They are ESG analysts, but they actually also rely on external rating services who provide us scores in various categories, and we take that raw data information and we put it on a scale of 1 to 5. Now, it's not, it's not some kind of real detailed scale, but ones are good. No ones is a one. I haven't seen any ones. So twos are also good. There's a lot of companies that are 2s. 3 is kind of an average score. 4 is a slightly below average score, and 5s are on the naughty list. So if you score a 5 in an area, that's not good. 4s are slightly bad, but sometimes these scores do move around. And I will tell you, because I work with all the scores putting these reports together, from quarter to quarter, these numbers will change. It is not like a credit score, which are also on this same report from both Moody's and S&P. And those tend to be relatively stagnant. They don't change that often. I mean, they might change once every couple of years, but these ESG scores are moving around based on what kind of headlines you have. And so in this report, I mean, the portfolio on a weighted average basis is about a 3. In an overall score. It scores very well environmentally. Some of these companies don't score as well on their social and governance scores. So, if you're more concerned about the environment, we're scoring well in the environmental piece of it. But there's also the social responsibility. Let's take, for instance, on this report, if you can look at it, US Bank's at the top. Well, they get a 2 for environmental. Well, you would think that because it's a bank, so it's not really polluting anything, It's not really, it's not producing things that are going into the atmosphere. So in general, it gets a good environmental score. Their governance score is a little weak, but where they really hurt is in their social score. So you can think of US Bank had some similar problems sort of as to a Wells Fargo, where they had customer issues and they had customer account issues and they had some problems like that. They get knocked down in their governance score a little bit because they felt the board didn't follow up on those issues sufficiently to stop them from reoccurring again. So they get knocked down a little bit in their governance scores. They're not treating their customers perhaps as fairly, or their employees as perhaps as fairly as they could. But they do well environmentally, so overall they have a 4. And you know, our policy has been is that we're really trying to get 2s and 3s into the portfolio. Now, when we have a few 4s in the portfolio, we're trying not to sell them and be a forced seller of those, but when they mature, we're trying not to replace them so much. That's our general goal. Now, some of the people who are 4s go through, when they get bad scores, they go through rehabilitation and they make themselves better, and their scores actually do improve, which is the whole point of the PRI to begin with, is that if you put social pressure and a spotlight on some of the people who aren't perhaps performing well out there, that social pressure will cause them to perform better, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of it. And so we're tracking them, and these discussions about the problems come up in our analysts, our credit analysts actually meet with these companies in earnings meetings. When they have their earnings meetings, they have earnings calls, and their credit analysts are actually on the call and ask questions about the ESG scores, because that's something that a lot of our people are concerned about. I would say most of our clients that are concerned about ESG scores are more governments, and our corporate clients are less concerned about it. So, and can I answer any more questions about it?
Yes, City Council Member Jen Willison has her hand raised.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that overview. Just 2 follow-up questions. One is the policy you have on seeking 2s and 3s, is that an Insight investment policy, or is that a Menlo Park City policy? And then my other question is, what was my other question? Oh, do you have any analysis on how ESG companies perform in terms of investment return versus non-ESG? And you don't have to answer all these now.
No,
These
no.
also can be things you can come back at another meeting, but these are just kind of questions that pop into my mind. Thank you.
I think those are both excellent questions. So let me talk about the first question. First question is this written into the current Menlo Park policy? No, but over the discussions that I've had both with Marvin and his predecessors, it's come to the fact that, look, the city's going to be ESG sensitive. So we came to the idea of, hey, well, if we're going to have 1 through 5s, let's try and be, and we're not going to see any 1s. Let's try and get mostly 2s and 3s into the portfolio. Occasionally, we're going to come across, and a 3 might get downgraded to a 4, and occasionally, but let's try and weed the 4s out of the portfolio. But let's not take any losses to do that. I mean, we don't want to sell any securities at a loss just because it's moved to a 4. And I think that's generally been the policy, but that's not written, and it's not necessarily our policy at Insight, but that's the policy we've come down to just in managing the portfolio and trying to be ESG sensitive to it. Now, the other question is, do I have any definitive study that would show that ESG sensitivity does better performance over time? I've never seen one that says that the performance is actually better over time. And I would tell you anecdotally that when you make a universe smaller, you're more likely to reduce your performance than to increase your performance. And that's essentially what you're doing with ESG. You are taking some players out of the system. For instance, I'll just give you an anecdotal thing. So you don't see Wells Fargo on here. Now, I'll preface this with Wells is my personal bank. So I know that they've had trouble and they've been chastised and they've been beat up. And our former chairman went from BNY Mellon to become the current chairman of Wells Fargo. But if I buy Wells Fargo securities in the market, they're a little beat up, so they pay 25 basis points higher sometimes because just to sell their bonds in the marketplace because some people don't want to buy them. Now, as a portfolio manager, and you want good performance in your account, and they're paying a little bit, given their credit rating, they pay a little bit up, what do? Should you add them in here? Now they'll come in here, I think they're a 5. So we add a 5 into the portfolio. Well, we're not using 5s, but they pay a little bit more relative to their credit rating.
Right.
You know, that's a call that we don't like to make ourselves. We would like our clients to make that call for us, because you know when we're reducing the securities in the portfolio, Exxon is another security that we've taken out of portfolios that are ESG sensitive. I will tell you though that during the pandemic, Exxon actually performed very, very well, and there were opportunities that we used at Exxon in other portfolios, and they performed well. However, for people who are fossil fuel sensitive, it can become an issue. So I think that's more anecdotal evidence but I've never seen a definitive study that says this will actually improve the performance in the portfolio. There's a lot of discussion in ESG circles about how that could happen, but there's never been anyone that has proven that I've seen in the numbers.
Just to follow up, so has there been any evidence that it does the other way, that it hurts the portfolio? I guess you talked anecdotally that shrinking the portfolio can do it.
I think, that's more anecdotally from my side. I have not seen a definitive study that it hurts the portfolio either.
Okay. This is Brian Westcott. Dave, I have 2 questions, or 1 question and 1 suggestion. But do you have any examples, or maybe in a future meeting we could see policies of maybe similar towns, cities in California, just to get an idea of policy? And the second suggestion I'm going to make for the committee is, I know pre-COVID or during COVID, there was some interest in the committee doing some kind of a review, or just starting to look into what an ESG policy might look like for Menlo Park. And Dave, as you said, this is a evolving area. It's somewhat new, but I'm sure in the future, at some point, there should be some kind of policy, and also an understanding, as Jen has mentioned, on the ramifications or the outcome of that policy, right? What you're trading off for different, but I think it's early on, and that's probably something that's going to have to take maybe even a few years to flesh out. So
we can certainly provide you with some samples of some other people who've worked ESG sensitive language into their policy. We've seen people do it very specifically, trying to attack certain fossil fuel issues. I'm thinking we manage funds in the city of Boulder as well, and they have a lot of very specific language in their policy. I tend to there's some more general policies that I think are better and give you a little bit of some broader flexibility. Okay. And that also addresses the issue, and then allows us to take an approach more similar to what we're doing here, which is not to be a forced seller. I never want to be a forced seller because someone gets downgraded. That puts you, in a loss situation where, if you held onto the bond for a year and a half, it just goes out of the portfolio. Everyone's happy and no one takes a loss on it. And I think that's a much better thing for us as a portfolio manager and for the clients, going, look, we know it's in there. We know we're watching it. We're monitoring it. It's going to go away in a year or whatever, and we'll let it go. So let me work with Marvin on that, and we can come back to you with some possible suggestions.
That would be terrific. Yes, and I agree with you. In a way, you did state a bit of a policy in that we want to err towards the side of return and acknowledge that this is still a very subjective area. And in fact, you made that point that these numbers are changing, quarterly, and that suggests that there is not, a set method that's been quantified and developed at this point.
I will tell you, I don't know if you've read Elon Musk's thoughts on it, but Mr. Musk came out and said he was mad because S&P has an ESG index of funds that are companies that are ESG responsible. Right. Tesla got dropped from the index, mostly not because of their environmental score, again, on their social responsibility score, because they've had some labor disputes and such at the company. And, like yesterday when he tweeted, said, if you want to work from home, you might as well go look for another job or something like that. So, he gets mad because he gets dropped, and then Exxon gets put back into the S&P 500's ESG index. So, his thing is, hey, I'm the guy making, electric cars, and you're talking about these guys as a fossil fuel company. So right. It's pretty subjective sometimes, I will tell you. And even when our guys explain it to us and they want to make it seem like a science, and
it's not.
It's hard for us portfolio managers because we're all numbers guys, and we're like, well, make this make sense to us, because we can't make sense of it.
Right. And I believe for Menlo Park, it's good if we at least get ahead of because those questions I think will come up with people, and sure. I think we should show that we are interested in it and looking in it and on top of it without being constraining.
And it is a growing area, and this area is going to only refine itself as it gets more mature. So it's better to have capabilities here, be on top of it. And I will tell you, we have invested a ton of money in this area, and we have a lot of capabilities. But it's an emerging area. That's what I'll say.
Okay. We have Carol Wong has her hand raised. Carol, you have the floor.
Thank you. I was just going to say one suggestion would probably be that we monitor the investments on a recurring basis. And if, for one of them, they all drop to fives one quarter, we should really, just take a deeper look and see, what's going on there. And maybe it does make sense for us to sell because there may be some issues.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because one of the things we look at for the ESG score is a risk factor, because these things, just like the Exxon Valdez, when they were not using the double hulled tankers and that sort of thing, that becomes a risk factor. And we like to know about that because it can affect the credit score if it's a bad risk factor. If there's something in there that we should be looking at, and that's a reason it's a 5, then maybe it affects the credit score over time. And so that's a possibility. It's one of the things we look at in the larger long-term scheme of things. We call it a landmine because you never know when it's really going to blow you up, and it can change your credit score pretty quickly. So that's one of the reasons why we started monitoring it, and now it's kind of grown from there. But it's a good point.
Okay, are there any other questions? Are there any questions from the public? All right, I believe we've completed then business item D2 and D3. Now we should be moving on to D4, review audit findings for fiscal year, and I assume we'll turn that over to Marvin. Thank you, Dave.
My pleasure, and I'm going to sign off. Take a good evening, everyone.
All right, we'll talk again, I'm sure.
I look forward to it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, committee, these are the audit findings for the June 30th, 2021 report. And there were a few findings that we had, and the staff responding to the findings, and we've also we have a small little update regarding where we are on the findings. The main thing regarding the findings was that we did a transition in the accounting system at the time of audit. And so that should not have happened, because the audit, even though it's a little bit in the background, the audit, but when you try to transition your financial accounting system in the middle of the audit, it's going to overtax staff. And in addition to that, some things might fall through a little bit. But, and also what the city had is doing last year's audit, we didn't have a finance and budget manager. And so now we do have a finance and budget manager. And so these audits, these particular findings in no way have caused the city's financials to have a material misstatement overall. These are just internal control findings. And so internal control findings can be, they can raise to that level if you get too many of them. But if you don't have too many internal control findings, then it's just a matter of the auditors saying, hey, these are some of the things we found. Now, what they found on one of the findings was the accounts payable accrual. And without giving a whole lot of detail on this, is that at the time that the audit takes place, the books should already be adjusted. And so essentially, when the audit gets ready to start, your books close on June 30th of any given year. And so when the audit gets ready to start their intern work is going to start maybe about 3 months after close. Your accrual adjustments are always supposed to have been made on the books, on the financials. But if they haven't been, and then you give the auditor incomplete accounts. So this is essentially kind of what happened. That we were kind of low on staff, and as a result of that, that was one of the things. So, but as you can see, our response is that we're going to make sure that all the accounts payables are accrued accurately before the field work starts. And also too, another thing is that is finance is going to make sure that we make sure that invoices are received in somewhat of a timely manner. Capital projects have a long lag. And so sometimes you can get an invoice 3 months after the work has been done on a capital project. And so we'll make sure that our department heads are staying on top of vendors so that they'll get all of those invoices in so that we can accrue those expenses back. And so that's one of the things we'll make sure. This other finding, the land held for resale, this was just an oversight because this is just basic accounting. We expensed some land that should have not been expensed. And so when we purchase land goes on the balance sheet. And so essentially they kind of expensed it rather than capitalize it to the balance sheet. And so that was just kind of an oversight of staff regarding that. But it was corrected. The bank reconciliation process I checked with my staff, and at this point, we're already through March. And so essentially, we're only 1 month behind. So this is June here. So May isn't done yet in the accounting world. And so we're only 1 month behind, essentially. And again, with our conversion, we still haven't used all of the modules yet in the accounting software. So the accounting software, if you're not completely transitioned over, you're reconciling in Excel, which is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that, because you can dump all of your checks and things out of the accounting system into an Excel file, and you can reconcile. But the easiest way is essentially to use the module in the financial accounting system to do your reconciliation. So we're working on making sure that we can get on that financial model so that reconciliation can go smoother. And those are all of the findings there. Do you have any questions
Marvin,
regarding
yes,
that?
we have 2 hand raised.
Okay.
We'll start with committee member Susanna Hill.
Okay.
Susanna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. A land purchase that is expensed rather than accrued is enough of a kind of a fundamental accounting error that I just want to ask, has that person been trained or replaced, or is there, is the staff that's been missing backfilled now, or are we still working on it? I know it's very hard to hire.
No. We're staffed up. So in the finance department now, we are staffed up. And I think a lot of it had to do with the transitioning and not having a finance and budget manager. And so we pretty much taken care of that.
Okay. And we have another hand, Mary, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm serving in the role of Administrative Services Director for the city, so I wanted to kind of follow up on Marvin's comments and say that I checked in with the staff and they're up to date on the bank reconciliations through April. More of the audit comment was, I think that at that point in time, the reconciliations weren't being reviewed for completeness. We now have a process in place where they're reviewed and signed off on each month. So that won't happen again. And during that time, I can't really speak to it because I wasn't here, but I know that they were going through a lot of transition and they were understaffed. So we've made a lot of improvements in that area. So we believe that with all of the corrections that we have in place, we won't anticipate these going forward.
Great,
That's
thanks. Just had to ask.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Public questions? All right. I think that completes agenda item D4. Next order is the consent calendar. Now I have a question. What is the action required? Because in the minutes of the December meeting, the consent calendar was approved. And that was passed. So what is the action for the consent calendar at this point? I'm not sure it's been changed, or is there additional review that's required?
Yeah, I don't know if Judy's still listening. She may not be.
But if you look forward again to the minutes, it was consent calendar. On the minutes, item E1, approved action. And action was to approve the consent. Oh, okay. It's now, I think actually I reread this. So the Finance and Audit Committee is supposed to approve, that's the action that was submitted in December, and we are supposed to approve the actual consent calendar and the investment approach.
Are we supposed to approve the minutes?
No, that's next. That's actually item E1. But I think there is the consent calendar, which is the investment policy for the city. And it's included in your portfolio. And so are there any questions on that investment policy? Because the action item then would be for us as the Finance and Audit Committee to approve this consent calendar or approve the adoption of this investment policy.
So if Vice Chair Brown, I can make a comment. The investment policy, the committee is recommending the
Yes.
policy that's going to be adopted by the board. And so we kind of spoke a little bit about the ESG, but at this point, we might not want to amend it with ESG language. We might not want to. Oh, wait a minute. Councilmember Jen has her hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very comfortable with how we discussed the ESG and continuing to move forward as we have been while we learn more about this emerging practice.
Mhm.
So I'm comfortable with the policy as it stands. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks for having that conversation about policy, and it might be something in the future the next time. Thank you.
Yes. And Jen, we'll note in future meetings to add this to the kind of the work schedule for the committee to start investigating policy. Okay.
Because bear in mind, the investment policy is, as long as it's broad enough, it won't restrict it. But once you put it in writing, it could restrict the investments. But now it's broad, even though it has no wording, so it's broad enough to include it. So.
Right. And I would suggest that we have a reason why we are not overly constraining with the
Okay.
ESG. As if public comment comes in, we need to explain why we would not over constrain using ESG as the starting point, I believe.
Perfect.
Okay. So Marvin, I believe we then just have to recommend that this is, from the committee standpoint, the investment policy should be reviewed by the city and the board. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's pretty much.
So anyone want to make a motion to recommend? I guess we'll do it as a motion. I'll make the motion to recommend that the investments policy be sent to the board, I mean, the council and used as is. Any second on that?
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Chair Westcott, I'm going to abstain because this is ultimately going to come to me. And I
Right.
don't know if it's appropriate for me to vote on it now.
Yes, no,
Okay.
thank you, yes. Okay, so note that City Council Member Jen Wallison has abstained from the vote.
And I
But-
believe Councilmember Taylor's having technical issues and she got bumped out and has been trying to get back in, but I don't know if she's been successful.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we have a quorum, so. All right, so that motion's been approved and we'll move on to the last item is the approved minutes of the December 13th Finance and Audit Committee. You had that in your package. Any comments? I think we covered most of the issues. All right, any comments? Motion to pass? I'll make the motion to accept the minutes. Second on that, please.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Anyone opposed to accepting the December 13 minutes? Okay, in favor? All aye. Okay, the minutes then have been approved. And I believe the next, one last thing though, is we should probably discuss calendar for the next meeting. All right, Marvin, are we going to try to get back on the third week of the month after the start of the quarter?
Yes, Vice Chair Westcott, that's the plan, is that we would get on a regular calendar schedule for the Finance and Audit Committee. Now that we have a good structure, we have good members, we have.
Right, I think we lost, we were almost there. Marvin, we lost you for just at the meeting notice.
I can jump in. We do plan to set a regular calendar schedule so that you all can mark your calendars going forward, at least through the end of the calendar year. And we'll look to see if we can do that into the next year, if it works with everyone's calendars and we can get a quorum.
Okay, Mary, could you tell us though specifically when the next meeting might be so we can put that in? Because I believe the normal cycle would be the third week in July.
Ronnie, did we already put out a request to see if anyone could attend? Where is she?
Hi,
There she
Mary.
is.
No, we
Hi.
have not
Okay.
reached out for the next one.
So the third, what was the third? I didn't catch the day.
Well, it used to be, and I'm not sure it was, it used to be the third week of the month after, of the first month in the quarter.
Okay, so the
Like
week
a
of the
Thursday. So,
the week of the 18th, the July 21st, that
uh,
would be the third
Yeah,
Thursday.
July 21st.
okay, so let's put that in as a tentative date, July 21st, just so people can plan.
Okay.
And maybe at 5:30, the same time as a tentative.
Sure.
Okay,
We
so
can put
next-
that out there and check.
yes. Okay, so that would be July 21st at 5:30. Okay, very good. Any other issues, questions? Okay, then I think the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you to the committee.
Oh,
Chair
wait,
Westcott,
yeah, one
yeah,
question.
I just want to let everyone know that the city manager will be doing a presentation on the budget this coming Tuesday, the 7th. And then the council will be having I don't know if it's a public hearing, a meeting about the budget, I believe, scheduled for the 14th. And then I think the hope is that we adopt it on the 28th because it has to be adopted by the 30th because our fiscal year starts July 1st. So for those of you who care about, I mean, you all care about the budget, but
Right.
want to stay tuned.
Yeah, that's
There's
kind
a
of
lot
what
of
we do.
budget action happening in June.
One other question, Jen, are council meetings in person again, or are they through Zoom?
They're hybrid. So
Okay.
some of the council are live. The city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk are all in person. I don't believe members of the public are currently encouraged to attend in person. I don't know if they're prohibited. I would ask the city clerk. I'm not 100% sure what we're doing.
Just
go-
curious on that.
Yeah, it's fair. It's a fair question. It's a work in progress, I think.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation. I'm glad we had this meeting, and we'll hopefully see you in July, which is only about 5-6 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.